on the very edge of the atmosphere of Bapedi 2. All the large civilian human ships that were used to disrupt and destroy the storms that were created specifically to kill everyone on the planet were forced to adjust their trajectory, aim themselves by altering course so they can place themselves between the planet and the new arrivals. It wasn't hard to see who this was. Confirmed its ISOish ships, primarily colony ships, as they believed that all the locals should be dead by now. Along with them are large freighters. These large freighters are known to be very difficult to land. However, they're needed, as they're designed specifically for rapid expansion onto a planet. Most of them, everyone knows, are full of mining equipment, as the ISOish there are actually a type of species that live in caves. Along with all these, there's at least 27 smaller personal transport ships, most of which are used to house their own as like mobile homes while they set up their caves. Also for things like mobile hospitals, kitchens, etc., so that they can aid in the destruction of this planet and what they would consider the construction of a new home. However, this was nothing compared to the 6 warships that were among them. This is a new feature, as before they would simply show up with their colonization ships and simply land and use their own point defense weapons to take out any of the locals, but now they realize they have issues landing on the planet. There's now 4 destroyer class and 2 frigate class, and the frigates themselves are actually the most dangerous because you never know what type of frigate they may be. One would look at one and just think it's another frigate, but it could be full of comms arrays calling in for fire down on the planet. It could call for additional reinforcements over areas and distances that they just don't understand. It could be full of jammers as well to make sure that you can't use guided munitions at all. It could be loaded to the gills with drones that can simply flood the sky and you don't have an arc to protect you. They could be loaded up with torpedoes as well. Torpedoes that they learn from dealing with humans need to be armored so that they can reach their target, dig inside, and explode, ripping a ship apart from the inside. If one was a mine layer, that was the easiest one to deal with. However, the ISOish had actually figured out that they could simply release their own mines towards the humans and humanity would simply have to move. The mines themselves might burn up in a planet's atmosphere on the way down, usually. However, it is enough to break a formation, as each of those are absolutely horrible. If they were lucky, these were just medical or recovery frigates. That would mean they are limited in munitions, meaning they're easy to fight. However, because you don't know which one, and they can be so dangerous, they are always the first ones to be targeted. Just like in one of those games where you always target the healer first to take them out of the equation. Judging by the movements of the enemy formation, the ISOish have actually figured out that humans are here. They do this by moving their warships more towards the center and in front of the formation. All the others pull back, but they're still in the standard spindle formation to maximize their firepower. They're also spacing themselves out enough that one catastrophic loss by splashing one ship is not going to cause catastrophic damage and catastrophic failure all over the entire fleet like it did on the WoW's homeworld, which was one of the ways they were able to liberate the planet. They learn from every engagement. They're not stupid. They do not alter themselves as fast as humanity does. They don't adapt as well. However, they are adaptable. They also keep their distance and try to attack at range, as they believe that they could get more hits on target if they got in close to humans. However, humans shown that they are the best when it comes to micro jumps. A jump in FTL that would put one of their ships right in the middle of the enemy formation. And since almost all the ships on the ISOish actually have their weapons fixed forward, they only have a few point defenses on the outside to protect themselves. They have no way of protecting from a main gun turret that suddenly will swing around and fire anywhere from 2 to 5 armor-piercing rounds right through their hull, venting everyone into the darkness of space. They don't set up the formation too close together, but they don't set up too far apart either. They also know, because of all the times dealing with humans, that they must be ready to charge if they need to. If they need to close the distance to make sure that they can get a time on target to actually engage humans effectively. They need to be ready to jump away at a moment's notice, which is why the energy spike is difficult to find, because all the jump engines are spinning up and spinning constantly, trying to make sure that they can get out if they need to. They also know to never, ever let humans get on your ship. If they get on, you only have about 2 seconds to scuttle your entire ship, because if you don't get a second chance. When they get on board, they move fast, extremely fast. Their weapons seem to move without them even thinking, taking out everybody there is. They seem to know exactly where the bridge is, and they can bust in or go straight to the engineering and shut down the engine, so scuttling the ship is not even a problem, not even an issue. And then, of course, that means the humans get the ship and all the intel on board. You do not let humans call for assistance either. You must take them out as fast as you can, because once they start forming packs, well, they're much, much more difficult. Taking out one ship is hard already, but it becomes infinitely harder once they start banding together. And always make sure that you focus fire. This is an absolute requirement, as each human point defenses are robust, to say the least. And also the armor is constantly upgraded, which means it's incredibly resilient. Sometimes they might strike an old ship that will simply get penetrated from stem to stern, from mouth to butt, right through. However, more often than not, the rounds will simply either hit and stop or simply ricochet off. What's even worse is many of the newer ships that humans have repair themselves. It's as though the entire inner hull is covered with nanotechnology. Nanotech that can, if you do focus fire, get overwhelmed, as it seems as though there's only so much on the ship. It's though humanity fears nanomachines just a little bit. However, with all this, they know what they need to do. As human ships that are stationed above the planet race around the planet itself, trying to hurry up to form a wall against the invaders coming in, on the ground, Carl and his crew rush to grab the medical pods. They grab the medical pods with the injured locals inside and rush them from his ship straight onto the ground transport and lock them down as fast and secure as possible. Once secured, they both run to the bridge, leaving the other member of the crew, a young Ashdam species, to drive and use the ground transport vehicle. With practiced efficiency, he immediately backs out of the cargo hold, and almost robotically he begins to activate the weapon systems, as he knows that just in case everyone fails above the planet, he must protect the land. The Ashdam species is simply a name given to them, as the actual pronunciation is Asanademe'anama. This Ashdam teenager was actually saved by Carl himself and seemed to pack bond, as he had lost his entire family during an Isoish invasion. The boy, if one looked at one, would think that they're physically around 10 years old, human 10 years old, which would be true. However, chronologically, he's actually 20, and he's been trained for well over a decade to do exactly what he's doing. The Ashdam are also very humanoid, but they are reptilian. Not amphibians, but amphibious. In fact, to look at him, you'd think he's a giant turtle in a trench coat. He wears that coat as the one thing that Carl actually first carried him into the ship with, wrapping him around. It's almost like a security blanket that he just won't leave. However, it'd be nice for everybody if he wore more clothing than simply the trench coat, a loincloth, and what Carl calls the butt flap. with amazing speed and almost grace. It seems as though he operates the ground vehicle, putting it into position and getting ready. Once everything is ready, prepped outside with the weapons ready, the main gun begins to raise. The missile racks open up. The drone launchers open up, getting ready to be deployed. And of course, the point defenses begin to extend out on all sides. He sits there as he watches the door close. And then, even before it even latches, the ship begins to take off. Aboard the ship, as the ground transport is being removed, Carl and his woman are prepping for launch. They retract all the bolts, augers, and everything else holding them to the ground, and secure all hatches and doors, and spin up the engines at the same time. His woman, that he calls Malevola, because that's the only way he can pronounce her name, says, "Energy spikes. Looks like the party's already getting started up there." Carl immediately goes, "Sneaky frickin' bastards. Well, I guess they've learned. Never underestimate your opponent, right?" The ship then elevates and immediately points towards space with a bow before accelerating faster and faster and faster. Carl calls up, "St. Elmo's Fire, this is Prozac and Pancakes. We are en route to your position. ETA, 4 minutes, 23 seconds, over." The response was, "Confirm, Prozac and Pancakes. Be advised, the enemy faction is attempting to close distance. Expect resistance as soon as you clear the atmosphere. Over." "Confirm, St. Elmo's Fire. We will stay alert. You just focus on staying alive and not dying till we get there." "Already on it. Fire out." They immediately throttle up, pushing the engines a little bit harder than they really should. At this point, Carl and Malevola can feel their hearts begin to push up against their spines as the G-forces continuously push and push and push. Carl himself is flexing his legs, flexing his arms, trying to make sure that he doesn't pass out. Malevola, on the other hand, is actually enjoying the pressure and liking it a bit too much, along with the shaking of the ship as it goes up at this speed. Carl can tell that she is, because the noises she makes, well, they help him stay awake, as he can't turn his head because of the forces, but he turns his eyes, and he can tell by the moving of the tail she is very much enjoying this. Once above the atmosphere, they can see the battle, and once clear of the gravity well, they engage in the battle, immediately locking on to everything they can and launching every single missile, every single torpedo, and letting the main guns just run themselves hot. As they do, he looks out the viewport and he can see that several of the enemy ships have actually passed the line and they're heading toward the surface. He realizes they're probably trying to dig in and wait for help, just long enough for the warships to actually show up. Carl flies directly towards the St. Elmo's Fire, trying to make sure that he gets there in time. He can see another ship has already been splashed. Another one is just having a hard time staying afloat. As he gets towards the St. Elmo's, he can see that they're taking a lot of fire. The point defenses are trying their best, but they're almost being overrun. Carl immediately pulls up and bypasses the St. Elmo's Fire, and he adds his own point defenses to theirs. Then, just as he does, 2 more human ships arrive. Then more and more and more, creating a full screen, and all the ordnance that's fired at them is not getting through. Immediately, they deploy the drones, fire anything they got left with missiles and torpedoes, and of course, the main guns are aimed directly at the destroyers. Why not the frigates? As the other larger ships had already taken the frigates out of the equation, violently. More and more human ships begin to join the line, one right after another, some coming in groups of 3, 4, 6, 20, and the tide completely turns as the destroyers begin to get splashed. Human losses were high in the beginning of the battle in comparison to their enemy, and now human losses are non-existent. The remainder of the enemy forces in space, as they see their own destroyers being torn to itty-bitty pieces, simply run for it. Though they're dogged the entire way as they try to turn themselves just enough where they can jump and not get caught in a gravity well, they're still getting blasted. A few don't make it, either disabled or destroyed. The rest take off. And one poor bastard actually went to FTL, but the moment they did, their own engines went critical and they became a tiny supernova in space. On the ground, an Ashdam takes aim with his main gun. He sees the ships there and fires a magnetically launched projectile at Mach 9.1. Each shot, calculated through the AI and through his own training, strikes every ship that he aims at, each one causing catastrophic damage. Many of them haven't even started to slow down yet, and once they have holes in the hull, they simply rip themselves to pieces. Some instantly splash, others will simply toss, turn, and burn in, and only one that's on his sensor actually gets to the ground, the one that came in behind him. That one, he's going to have to get up close. He immediately throttles up, checking his radar to see if there's any other ships coming in, and this is going to be the last one. His armored transport moves as fast as they can, actually activating a gravimetric lift system so that he can move a hell of a lot faster. When he gets there, he finds the enemy trying to set up a perimeter, yet they can't, though they try. There's another ground transport on the other side of them, already engaging, tearing them apart. However, it seems as though the enemy is holding just enough, but not anymore. He comes in, firing his main gun, and rushes the line, not even slowing down, just blasting away with everything. He activates the AI-guided point defenses, and they tear everything apart, turning every single one of their enemy into nothing but chunky dog food. And once inside the perimeter, he grins. That same grin he learned from Kyle. Not a normal grin. When he first learned it, it was a little painful. But now, that mischievous, monstrous grin he has as he activates the plasma thrower and sprays a whole bunch of sticky fire all over the enemy. He can't hear them as he's inside the hull of this massive behemoth, but he can see them writhing in pain. And as he grins, he raises his hand, and even though he only has 4 digits, he puts one towards the sky. The losses on the ground for Allied forces were extremely few. Those that were lost usually got struck by a ship that actually crashed down on top of them. The losses for those enemy that made it to the ground were total, as in 100% no survivors. Once the battle's over, Carl takes a deep breath and immediately starts closing down all of his weapon systems, putting everything back as he can't have them out if he wants to get back down onto the planet. As the mechanisms are slowly closing, he looks over to his woman sitting there in the co-pilot seat, and he sees Malevola, and she looks all sort of excited after the battle, as though she's been shot up with about a quart's worth of adrenaline. This sort of thing frightens the crap out of her, as her species really wasn't the violent type before, but now it simply gets her going. But to see her like this, to see her to the point where she could probably get so excited she could rip through the hull of this ship, frightens and excites him. He thinks for a moment, maybe we could spend a few extra hours or maybe a few extra days up here before we go back. Then reality sets in, and he immediately calls up St. Elmo's Fire and says, unless you require assistance, we're heading back to the surface. I need to verify that the rest of my crew is okay. We need to get to the planet ready to defend itself as well, very, very quickly. All they heard was, "Understood. Have a good flight. Thanks for the assistance. Out." As they leave, Malevola turns and asks, "What's the rush? Seriously, why can't we just stay up here?" As she reaches over and begins to caress his arm and move her arm down past his hand, reaching towards his thigh. Carl, not exactly in the mood, immediately presses a few buttons and pulls up the star map. Tells her, look at this. See the location here? Look at where the location of this planet is, this solar system. You see the tactical necessity of this solar system? With the lines that moved and where we are right now, think about it. Just like it was in your world, these folks, these Bapedi or whatever in the hell they call themselves, are now in the eye of the storm. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on the second half of this story. And before I go, I need to say that today's winner is V, along with Alan Williams coming in a really close second. And I also need to send out some huge-jantus thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac and Pancakes, MTF Guard,
Heresy,
Brian Kemp, Erica Gem, Julius Boone, Guardian Sage,
gotcha, bitch,
and Steve Ewing. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, and I'm punching out.